My head looks huge in this frame. Hey, what is up guys? Ken Okada here with another 5 Minute Friday video where I explain something about rehab, fitness, or something interesting or useful for you in 5 minutes or less. So today let's talk about that low back. So the lumbar spine is made up of some pretty hefty bones, and the muscles that attach to it are relatively strong, but it's kind of in a unique place since that region is responsible for different movement functions while simultaneously protecting the organs in our midsection. Now, the lower back can get overwhelmingly complicated with all of its different structures and chaotic biomechanics, and because of that, training methods, maintenance, and rehab tend to be really complex, but it really doesn't have to be that way. If we guide our philosophy around a couple of very simple principles, we could eliminate a lot of that confusion when it comes to our movement. And that's really the reason behind this particular video. If we know the basics of how our backs work, we could probably avoid some sort of injury. So like I said before, the low back and core serve multiple functions, and really the reason why I'm including the core in this conversation is because it's almost impossible to separate the core from the low back. Now, when it comes to movement, we can think of two main functions that operate on kind of a continuum. So first, let's talk about mobility. A healthy low back should be able to move in all of its different ways with ease and without pain. Now, this is the left side of this continuum on this graphic that I drew. This usually happens when there's little to no load on the spine. Movements at higher velocities and accelerations tend to be better tolerated here since there is less force being generated. Remember that force equals mass times acceleration. So as a general rule, when too much force is being generated from the low back, structures tend to fail. Also, a side note, injuries can still occur here, especially if you don't have a strong core or low back. Now let's look at the other side of this continuum, when the spine is under some sort of load. Now as we increase the load, less movement can originate from the low back, and instead it should become a very stable bridge between your low back and your upper body. The role of the low back and the entire core then turns into transferring the force generated from your legs and your hips, transferring it through a very stable core and transferring it to the upper half of your body. Now this is where the distinction between generating force from your low back as opposed to your hips becomes very important. When your low back is being held static, there's very little force originating from the low back and core. This is where the concept of hinging from your hips becomes very important. Now we can see that both ends of this continuum are used by elite athletes everywhere. When on the field or the court, an athlete is usually under little or no load. Being able to move their body through space and turn their torso with a lot of velocity is really important. Now on the other hand, elite weightlifters and powerlifters need to lift insane amounts of weight, whether it be in the squat, deadlift, clean and jerk, or the snatch. Under these tremendous loads, you will almost never see movement from their core. Their backs are locked in and they drive their movement with their legs and their hips. So how on earth can this information be useful for you? Simple. When you lift something, engage your core, lock in your back, and instead generate all the force that's needed from the legs and your hips. Also, keep the loads that you lift near your center of mass, and that will decrease the load transferring through your low back. So you see, things don't have to always be really complicated when it comes to your movement. No doubt this really only scratches the surface, and I'm planning on diving deeper with this topic because the low back is complicated. And that sort of ties into why so many things can go wrong with it. When you increase the number of components and responsibilities for a given body part, or anything really, more things tend to go wrong. The good news is that the vast majority of low back problems and injuries will resolve itself, and you will return to your normal level of function. And even in the case of lingering pain, once you remove the underlying cause of the pain, it usually resolves itself. Now this isn't a video about rehab of the back or chronic back pain. We're talking about the underlying foundation to its function and how things generally work. So I'll leave that conversation for another video, especially since all of those nuances can take a lot longer than 5 minutes to talk about, and we're trying to keep a theme here. 5 minutes, right? So that's it today, guys. Hope you learned something valuable from this video. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos, please drop a comment below. Subscribe for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.